Hey, it's Mo. I think this, I hope, is helpful because I was really curious about this line. It's the L'Oreal Age Perfect makeup line. They've had the L'Oreal Age Perfect, like various skincare things for several years, but they just launched in the last, I'm going to say month and a half, makeup. And it includes foundation, powder foundation, there's blush, there's lipstick, two kinds of lipsticks, mascara and liner, and there's no eyeshadows, at least that I saw. So I was just going to try one of the liquid foundations. And as I tried it, first of all, it wasn't the right shade. Not shocking from the drugstore. It's so hard to choose. But I picked up a lot more of it. This is what I do have. I don't have every color, certainly, but I picked up most of the pieces because I was curious about how do the individual pieces work and do they work together and does it make a difference? So the idea with the Age Perfect line, which you may or may not know, is that it's for more mature skin. I did put on the Serum Foundation is what it's called. And I have it in the shade Rose Ivory. It's still not a perfect match for me. I do think most of the lighter shades that I found were leaning pretty peachy or yellowy. I tend to go for a very neutral undertone. I've talked before that I almost like a gray undertone, which is difficult to find in a lot of lines. So the original color that I got was the lightest color Ivory, 10. And that really was a bit too light for me. The Rose Ivory is better and it's pretty close. It's still pretty peachy looking, and I'm going to put both of these just on my hand. I don't know how much of a good kind of idea you'll get of the color, but I do want you to get a sense of the consistency of this Radiant Serum Foundation. By the way, it does have SPF 50. It is a combination of chemical and physical sunscreen. I know some people don't prefer to use chemical sunscreen, so that could be a deal breaker for you. So this was the Ivory, which was too light for me, and this is the Rose Ivory, which is the shade I have on right now. So let's just see here. We've got some light today. Oh, if you have not been here before, I always film with natural light to keep things as realistic looking as I can. I want you to see my skin. I put way too much of that on. But you can see the shade difference here. This one clearly more peachy. This one pretty yellow, but it's lighter. This is the foundation applied with my fingers. Now, the reading that I've done recommends fingers or a sponge, not a brush, because it suggests that it will leave streaky lines. If you use a brush, I've used a brush. I personally felt like it took a lot more foundation to get decent coverage with a brush, and I haven't tried a sponge because, frankly, I've been really happy with just using my fingers, and typically I use my fingers for most foundations. If I was left to my own devices, I don't think I would have bought this concealer. It didn't really interest me because I had a hunch it was going to be pretty slippery and pretty not really cover much up, but I felt like for you it might be useful to see, well, okay, we've got the foundation, what does the concealer look like? Now the concealer is interesting because this is the lightest shade, this is Ivory, and this does have kind of that gray undertone. So this would be a better shade for me, I think, as a foundation, but they don't make foundation in this shade. So the shades of the foundation and the concealer don't quite match up. Not that that's highly unusual, but anyway, I'm going to put this on. So I don't typically put concealer under my eyes. I just don't like to pack things under there, but my nose is perpetually runny, so I do tend to put concealer around there. And I just want you to see this going on. So can you see this is still red? This is pretty well covered up. Pretty well. It's not like an e.l.f. camo concealer. It's not that level of coverage. But you can see the difference, I think. And it meshes well with the foundation. So let's just take a look here. There's foundation with the concealer. Now, if I do nothing, if I don't blow my nose, if I don't touch my face, it looks very nice. But it doesn't last very long. This is not transfer proof. This is not a transfer proof foundation. So when I'm touching it, it still feels tacky, and I didn't put on a ton of it. Now, I think it looks very nice. It does have, just as I said, a bit of radiance. And I think generally a radiant foundation is going to have a bit of touch to it, a bit of tack, as people say. So that's something you want to be aware of. And I've worn it like this many times. So at the end of the day, I come home and there's definitely still makeup on after 13 or 14 hours. But when I'm wiping the cotton pad with, the micellar water over it, there's not a ton on there. There's definitely some. So it looks nice. It looks very nice on application. It's not a long-last powerhouse foundation. I did get the creamy powder foundation, mainly again because I wanted to try it for you. But I did try this several times and I use it over the foundation. And what I found was when I did that, at the end of the day, I had much better coverage still at the end of the day. So this is the foundation. It is a very nice feeling powder. I would almost say it's creamy. So I'm just using the Real Techniques multitasking brush and kind of putting it in here. Heavier than I would a regular powder, but not as heavy as a powder foundation. And I just kind of brush that all over. And mainly I'm using this to set. I'm really not using it for a lot more coverage, but it does add some coverage, which is rather nice. And you can, change that based on how heavily you use it. But you can see it's not flat. It has a bit more coverage. And I wanted to show you the packaging on this. So it's obviously just a compact, but then underneath, as you've seen, I'm sure before, there's a mirror with a sponge. Obviously, I didn't use the sponge. I don't find that particularly helpful because, like, if I'm putting this on, got my brush in it, and then I have to flip it up to do this, and then I have to flip it back to get the powder. I get it, but I would much rather just have a compact with a mirror and the lid. It would make much more sense to me. The blush is packaged that way also. In fact, let's do the blush next. So the Age Perfect Radiant Satin Blush. This is in the shade Peony. I will swatch this for you, because even when you see it on, it's still nice to see a swatch, I think. Let's give you a swatch here of that. So this particular shade is a fairly peachy, but certainly some pink. If I had it to do over again, I'd probably choose a slightly pinker shade. I tend to lean toward cooler pinks. I know there's a shade called Rosewood, there's a shade called Mauved, but this is the one I had, and I've used it many times. And I do think this is a nice blush. I am a genius, and I washed my brushes last night, which I rarely do. They're not dry yet. Awesome planning on my part. So anyway, I'm just gonna go into the blush. And you can see it's got impact right away. There's nice pigmentation on this blush. And it's easy to put on. It's smooth. Ooh, lighting. And it has just one, it's a slightly radiant blush. But it's not shimmery per se. Like when I look at it, I'm not seeing any shimmer particles, but on the skin, it does blend in very nicely. It does blend in very nicely to that particular foundation, I will say. Works nicely with the Radiant Serum Foundation. And I don't have a ton of that on. I usually use a pretty light hand with my makeup, truthfully. So I really do like the blush. I think it's a really nice blush. I think there's about 6 shades, so not like crazy number of shades, but pretty good. And in terms of the foundation range, there are 30 shades. And that sounds pretty good. It's really hard for me, or I think for any individual, to say it's a great shade range because you only have one skin tone that you're dealing with. So it goes from, like I said, that ivory shade, which is light, it's not the lightest I've ever seen certainly, to pretty deep, but I can't say, does it go deep eye? Does it have enough undertones? That kind of thing. Like even in my shade range, I felt like the undertones were pretty limited. So just something to keep in mind. I put eye primer on today, the Milani eye primer. I didn't put anything else on because I want you to be able to see kind of how the liner and the mascara work without anything interfering. So this is the liner. It's pretty standard pencil liner. It is an automatic, meaning it's not a wooden pencil. And I will say I do like this. Here's the drawback. There's no sharpener. you know how like you do things that are irrational? Here's one that I do. I have pulled the end of this thing off like 10 times. Like, there's got to be a sharpener in there, right? I'm just not seeing it. There's no sharpener. The end comes off, but there's no sharpener. And I find that kind of frustrating because if I want to use a pencil liner, I want it to be precise, or as precise as a pencil can be. And since I can't sharpen it, and particularly since they're targeting people who might have more crepey eyelids and need a smoother line, I think it's interesting that there's no sharpener. By the way, I don't think you can tell, but there's a rubber grip on this. I'm just going to throw this on. Not in a very elegant manner, but just so you can kind of see it here. And I don't tend to wing my liner out. So there. And that was pretty quick and easy. I do like this liner. It's pretty nice. So this one's a little thicker than I intended. Again, a sharpener would help. But that's the general idea. And I've worn this, I don't know, 10 times, and it really does stay on very nicely. It doesn't migrate, it doesn't rub off, it's waterproof. Overall, I really like this pencil. I think it's pretty nice. And then here's the mascara, which is called Lash Magnifying Mascara. It's supposed to have jojoba oil and be kind of conditioning. The reason that I got this was because I was curious about, it says it has a gentle brush, good for sensitive eyes. Here's the brush. So bristle brush, not like a hard plastic one. It's got, you know, somewhat of a taper at the end there, so you can try to get in right into the inner corner. And I do think this is a pretty nice mascara. I don't really understand the gentle brush thing, I'll be honest with you. To me, it's just a mascara brush, mascara wand. I mean, I haven't noticed that it's particularly pokey or anything, but I don't really get that. But I do think, and I did get black, by the way. It looked to me like they had black and they had brown. I didn't see a lot of blackest black or carbon black or, you know, end of the world black or whatever the names are. So again, I didn't put any eyeshadow or anything on it. I just wanted you to be able to see kind of the combination of the mascara and the liner. Give you kind of the truest interpretation of that I could. So hopefully that part is helpful, but I really do like that liner and I do like the mascara quite a bit. Then the lips. This was very interesting. So again, left to my own devices, I would not have bought either of these lipsticks. I feel like, age perfect lipstick, whatever. There's a billion lipsticks out there. I don't need a specific formula that's allegedly for people of a certain age. But I thought it might be useful for you. So there are two different kinds of lipstick. In fact, you can see there's even different packaging. This has like kind of an ombre effect gold, and this one has gold lines down it. This one is considered a satin lipstick with precious oils, and this one is considered more of a conditioning lipstick. And you'll see, so the satin one, as I said, with that gold ombre, that one just looks more like a traditional lipstick bullet. And this is Subtle Primrose. By the way, that is the color. And then this one has one of those, what I call like a conditioning core. You know, it's got like a core of, we'll say it's moisturizer in there. I don't tend to like this type of lipstick in general. I mean, they've been around for a couple decades, this style of lipstick. And I hate that like the color goes over the core, and then really how much is color and how much is just the core of the stuff. I'm not a huge fan of these. So purchasing these, I thought, okay, satin lipstick, that's more up my alley. I like this better. And this one, I'm not gonna like. Curiously, I don't feel that way. So this is the satin lipstick with precious oils. And this is Subtle Primrose, as I said. This almost feels like, it feels a lot like a lip oil, like they say this has precious oils in it. But to me it feels a lot like a oilier, greasier lip balm. Some people really like that. I don't. I prefer a lip balm that has a little more body to it. Not waxy exactly, but it's a little thicker. There's a little more to it. This just feels very slippy slidey to me, and it does not last, which is okay. If that's what you're looking for and you're not expecting longevity, you just want something that's comfortable and kind of, we'll say, nourishing. I think this is that, but it's so slippery when I do that. It's very pretty, but it's, to me, it's a thin, slippery lip color. And then the other one with the conditioning core, which I thought would be more like that one, which I have in the shade Bright Mocha. This is the other one. And I only put one swipe of that on so you could see pretty realistically what that's like. So this feels much more creamy, much more, this is a really nice lipstick actually. Now, so this is Bright Mocha with the conditioning core. And this lasts, again, this isn't an all-day lipstick, but it definitely lasted better than the satin finish. And I would have thought just the opposite. So two kinds of lipstick, again, different packaging. This one, as far as I can tell, is completely unscented. So the satin one that's very oily is not scented. This one, unfortunately, has that L'Oreal floral powdery lipstick smell that I am not a fan of. I don't really mind scented things. In fact, I love fragrance, like perfume, but I don't love it in my makeup. But this one is pretty strongly fragranced. So it's like, here's what I wish they had done. I wish this was the one without fragrance, because then I'd be like, yeah, this is a great, great lipstick for a good, nice, creamy lipstick. But this one's really fragranced. So know that if you're looking for this. So it's really interesting because I really like this. I like the color. I like the feel. It does. It feels really nice on. I think it looks pretty. But that smell it's intense. It's that L'Oreal lipstick scent, if you're familiar with that. It's not subtle. But the other one for me is just like, it's putting greasy stuff on my lips and I don't care. So let's just talk about my impressions of the whole line now that we've kind of been through everything. So let's talk about the Serum Foundation first of all. I like this. It's nice, and I do rather like the radiance that it gives, particularly like this time of year, you know, late winter, my skin has gotten dry and it looks a little dull, frankly. I think this has been a nice pick-me-up for my skin, so I do like it. And I use a pretty light hand, so it's not like coming off on me, but it's also not staying on, like I said, if I have to touch my face or wipe my nose or something more aggressive like that. So if you're looking for longevity, I don't think this is it. If you're looking for kind of a nice evening out and a rather radiant finish that doesn't, at least for me, does not settle at all into lines or into pores or anything, I think this is pretty nice. The concealer for me, I don't get. You don't really get coverage. It's pretty slippy slidey, so it's not staying on that long. Maybe under the eyes, maybe if that's your thing, you might like it. I would pass on the, and I just dropped it. I would pass on the concealer. For the eyes, I like both of these. I like the liner quite a bit. Wish it had a sharpener, L'Oreal. And I do like this mascara. I'm going to continue to use both of these. I really like these. And then the blush, I very much like this. I don't know that you have to spend this much on a blush. You know, I think it's around $10 or $11, but it's very nice. I don't really have any argument with this blush. It's nice, it's pretty. If you find a shade that you like, you might really like that formula. And the Creamy Powder Foundation, while I don't really wear powder foundation, for me this worked really well to just kind of set the more radiant foundation without dulling it down, without making it look really flat. And it did help the longevity. So like the combination of the two, I kind of like. And then the lips, I think I've been pretty clear about that I'm like, oh, if this one only stayed on longer, or oh, if this one just didn't have that darn fragrance. If I'm going to recommend one, it's definitely this one, the one I'm wearing with the conditioning core. But if that fragrance bothers you, it's not going to be your jam. So that is everything I tried from the L'Oreal Age Perfect makeup line. And I hope that was helpful, because that really is my only purpose here. And when I'm purchasing things to review and I'm thinking about, you know, what video I'm going to do or whatever, I always try to do it from your perspective. What would be useful? What would be helpful? How can I make that more useful to you, more helpful? And I love this stuff, and I really appreciate that you just hang out with me and talk makeup. And I really hope you're having a good day, and I'll talk to you soon.